I didn't used to think about rubbish as something you could measure your life with. Back then, I measured my life in smaller things, in how many coins I could feel at the bottom of my pocket without looking, in how long the tea leaves would stretch, in whether my daughter's shoes still had a little shape left, or if they had started folding in on themselves like tired mouths. I measured time in mornings, in the way the sky looked when I stepped outside and didn't know if the day would be kind, in the way my daughter slept, one hand curled under her cheek as if she was holding her own face together. We lived in a room that belonged to someone else, not officially, just the way many rooms belong to someone else. Through silence and understanding and the fact that the landlord never wrote anything down. The walls were thin. The paint had been white at some point, but it had learned other colors over the years. Smoke, steam, fingerprints, the quiet brown of damp. In the corner, there was a patch of mold that always returned no matter how many times I wiped it. It felt like an honest thing in our home, a reminder that some things don't leave just because you ask them to. In the morning, I would wake before my daughter, not because I was disciplined, because my mind didn't let me sleep late. I would lie there in the dark and listen to the street, a lorry passing, a dog barking once and then quiet again, a woman's laughter somewhere, soft and brief, like a coin dropped on the ground. I would think about the day ahead, not in big plans, just in needs. Bread, soap, bus fare, a notebook, the school uniform that didn't fit right. My daughter Mina was 7 when she first asked me why I didn't go to work like other fathers. She asked it without cruelty. Children ask questions the way they touch things directly, without knowing what might break. I was sitting on the edge of the mattress tying the laces of my own shoes. The laces were not the same length anymore. One side had been replaced with a piece from an older pair. I pulled them tight anyway. "Baba," she said, "why don't you have a job with a building and a chair?" It made me smile in a way that didn't reach my chest. "I do work," I told her. She watched me. She always watched me. Her eyes were wide and patient, as if she had been born with an understanding that things took time. "But where?" she said. I looked at the little uniform hanging on the nail in the wall. It was washed and dried and washed again. It had a faint shine where the fabric had thinned. "I work outside," I said. She nodded as if that explained everything. Then she asked, "Is it enough?" It was that second question that stayed with me, not the first. Is it enough? That was what my whole life felt like. A question that never finished. Before Mina was born, I had other jobs, small ones, loading boxes, helping at a mechanic shop, carrying sacks of rice at a market, work that made my hands hard and my back sore, but work that came with a kind of dignity because people could name it. People could say, "He works at the market," and that sentence sounded like a place you could stand. After Mina's mother left, everything changed without making a sound. No big fight, no plates breaking, just a suitcase. Just a door closing carefully as if she didn't want to wake the neighbors. I remember sitting on the floor with Mina in my lap, her cheek pressed to my shoulder, watching the empty space where her mother's shoes used to be. I remember thinking that maybe she would come back after she cooled down. Then I remember thinking quietly that she wasn't cooling down, she was leaving. People have theories about why women leave. They speak like it is a simple story. Maybe she was selfish. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she found someone else. I didn't know the full reason, not in words, but I knew the feeling of watching someone stare at the same small room, the same cracked basin, the same stack of unpaid bills, and seeing their eyes change, as if their spirit was already walking away, even while their body was still there. After she left, I had to make the room hold us. I had to make food appear. I had to make Mina's school fees happen. as if money was just another kind of weather you could predict. At first, I tried to keep my old work, but with Mina, I couldn't stay out late. I couldn't travel far. I couldn't take jobs that paid in promises. People would say, "Come tomorrow for your wage," and tomorrow would come and they would shrug. I learned quickly that tomorrow is a place where poor people often live. Then school came. Mina's school wasn't fancy. It wasn't the kind with bright green fields and shiny computers, but it was still school. It still had uniforms and notebooks and fees that had to be paid on time. There was a head teacher who spoke gently but never forgot a deadline. There were other parents who seemed to have money without it showing effort. They stood straight. They carried bags that didn't sag. They spoke about holidays like they were discussing groceries. I would stand at the gate and wait for Mina, and I felt like my clothes were shouting something I didn't want them to say. Even when I tried to keep them clean, even when I ironed my shirt on the floor with an old pan filled with hot water because we didn't have an iron. I didn't want Mina to inherit my shame, not because shame is genetic, but because it travels. It passes from adult to child in small ways, in the way you lower your voice when someone asks what you do, in the way you laugh too quickly, in the way you tell your child, "Don't ask for that," before they even ask. The first time I collected rubbish, I didn't call it that. I told myself I was looking for recyclables. That sounded nicer, as if I was doing something for the environment, as if I belonged to the world. The truth was simpler. I was hungry. Mina needed a new pair of shoes for school because the old ones had a split at the toe, a split that widened when she walked, like the shoe was opening its mouth to complain. The shoes were cheap, but cheap still costs. I had asked for work at the market, and the man who used to give me shifts said, "Not this week." I didn't argue. Poor people don't argue much because arguing is a luxury. You need energy for it. You need a belief that the world cares. That morning, Mina was at school. I stood in the room and looked around as if an answer might be hidden somewhere. The room looked back at me with its familiar emptiness. I walked outside without knowing where I was going. On the corner, there was a row of bins behind a bakery. They were large and plastic, and the lids didn't close properly because the bins were always full. I had walked past them many times. I had smelled them. I had turned my face away. That day I stopped. There was no dramatic moment, no music, just me standing there hearing my own breathing. I looked around. People were walking by, busy with their own lives. A man with a briefcase, a woman talking into her phone, a boy running with his backpack bouncing. Nobody was looking at the bins. It felt like a small kind of permission. I lifted the lid. The smell hit me immediately, sweet and rotten at the same time. The kind of smell that makes you taste metal. I hesitated. Then I reached in. My fingers touched damp paper, plastic, something soft I didn't want to name. I pulled out a cardboard box with a few clean plastic bottles inside. They were sticky with old drink, but intact. I held them like they were something precious. I found another bottle, then another, and slowly, without announcing it to myself, I kept going. By the time I stopped, my hands were shaking, not from effort, but from the quiet humiliation of it. I washed my hands at a public tap until the skin felt raw. Still, the smell clung. It always did, even after soap, even after time. At the recycling shop, the man weighed the bottles and handed me a few notes. Not much, enough for bread, enough to feel like the day wasn't a complete loss. I folded the notes into my pocket and walked home. As I walked, I realized something. Nobody had stopped me. Nobody had shouted. Nobody had pointed. The shame had been mostly inside me. That didn't mean it wasn't real, but it meant it was mine to carry. And if I could carry it, I could also use it. The next day, I did it again. This time, I brought a sack. The sack was an old rice bag, patched at the corner. I wore gloves I found at a construction site. They were too big. They made my fingers clumsy, but they helped. I started learning which places were better. Behind the cafes, near apartment blocks, outside offices on certain days. I learned the rhythm of the city, the way people throw away good things without thinking. A shirt with a missing button, a book with a torn cover, a toy with one wheel gone. I learned to look quickly, to pick and choose, to move before someone noticed and decided to make me feel small. Sometimes people did notice. Sometimes I caught a glance, a quick scan of my clothes, my sack, my bent posture. Some faces showed disgust, some showed pity, some showed nothing at all, which was almost worse because it meant I was invisible. I tried to keep my head down, not because I agreed with the judgment, but because I didn't have space for conflict. At home, I would scrub my hands, I would wash my clothes, I would boil water if we had enough gas. I wanted Mina to smell like school and soap, not like bins and street dust. She never asked where the money came from. Children often know more than they say, but they also accept what you give them if it comes with steadiness. When I handed Mina a new notebook, her face would light up. She would run her fingers over the clean pages as if she could already see her future in them. "Thank you, Baba," she would say. Her voice was soft, not spoiled, just grateful. That gratitude hurt sometimes because I knew how little it cost to make her happy, and I knew how fragile happiness could be. The school sent notes home, sometimes about fees, sometimes about supplies. One day, Mina brought home a note about a school excursion, a trip to a museum. It wasn't expensive, but it was extra. Extra was the most painful word in my life. Mina put the note on the floor in front of me, careful like she was offering something that might sting. "Only if we can," she said. I stared at the paper. It had a deadline date on it. It had a little line where parents were supposed to sign. I felt my throat tighten, not because of the money alone, but because I could see her trying to make herself smaller so she wouldn't burden me. That was the inheritance I hated, not poverty. But the way poverty teaches a child to shrink. I picked up the pen and signed it. "We'll do it," I said. Mina didn't jump. She didn't scream. She just exhaled slow, like she had been holding her breath for days. That week, I collected more. I went out earlier. I stayed out longer. I walked to neighborhoods where the bins were cleaner, where the waste was the kind that came from comfort. I carried the sack until my shoulder burned. I ignored the stares as best I could. At night, I lay on the mattress and listened to Mina breathing. I told myself it was worth it, that she would go to the museum and stand under tall ceilings and see old things and feel like the world was bigger than our room. Sometimes, while collecting rubbish, I would find something that made me pause. A child's drawing thrown away. A birthday card, half written. A school book with someone's name on the cover, tossed like it meant nothing. I would hold those things and feel something sharp inside me, not anger exactly, more like grief, because people throw away evidence of their lives so easily. But I held on to mine with both hands. In the afternoons, Mina would come home and tell me about school, about the teacher who wore bright earrings, about a boy who always chewed his pencil, about the way the classroom smelled like dust and chalk. She spoke slowly, like she was laying each detail in front of me, making a small world I could share. I would listen while I fixed rice or lentils. Sometimes I nodded. Sometimes I asked a question. Sometimes I just let her speak because her voice was the most peaceful sound in my life. One evening, she told me they were learning to read longer stories. "I like the sad ones," she said. I looked at her. "Why sad ones?" I asked. She shrugged. "They feel true," she said, searching for the word. Then she added, "But not too sad, just quiet sad." Quiet sad. That was our home. That was my heart most days. Not dramatic. Not tragic in a way that people make films about. Just quiet. Just a long stretch of doing what needed to be done. There were days when I wanted to stop, not because collecting rubbish was physically hard, though it was, but because it wore down something inside me. It made me feel like I was disappearing, like I was turning into a shadow that moved from bin to bin while the rest of the world walked in straight lines. On those days, I would come home and sit in silence. Mina would do her homework on the floor near me. Sometimes she would glance up at my face, and I knew she could sense the heaviness. She never asked. Instead, she would slide her pencil case closer to me, as if the simple presence of school supplies could remind me why we were doing this. That small gesture, more than anything, kept me moving. The hardest part wasn't the collection. It was the moments after. When I had washed and cleaned and changed and I still felt dirty inside. When I sat alone at night and thought about Mina growing up and remembering her father by the smell of bins. When I imagined her telling someone one day, my dad collected rubbish, and hearing their reaction. I didn't want her to feel ashamed of me, but I also didn't want her to have to carry my story at all. I wanted her to have her own. The school held a Parents' Day once, a day when parents could come in and meet teachers and see work displayed on the walls. I almost didn't go. I told myself I was busy. I told myself it wasn't necessary. Mina didn't beg. She just said, "If you come, I'll show you my writing." It wasn't guilt, it was an invitation. So I went. I wore my cleanest shirt. I washed my face carefully. I combed my hair as best I could. At the school gate, other parents stood in clusters. They talked easily. They smiled. They had a kind of confidence that comes from not worrying about every small expense. I felt my shoulders tighten, but I kept walking. Inside the classroom, Mina ran to me, her eyes bright. "Baba," she said, pulling me toward the wall. Her writing was pinned up. A small story about a girl and a garden. Simple but full of feeling. At the bottom, the teacher had written in red pen, "Beautiful detail, keep going." I stared at those words for a long time. Keep going. It felt like someone had written it directly to me. The teacher shook my hand. She looked at Mina, then at me. "She's very focused," she said. "Sometimes children who are focused have had to learn to wait," she added gently. I didn't know what to say. I nodded. My throat felt tight again. When we walked home, Mina held my hand. Her fingers were small, warm. She swung our joined hands slightly, the way children do when they are safe. I thought about all the rubbish I had carried, all the sacks, all the smells, all the moments of looking away. And I thought about this moment walking home with my daughter, her writing in my pocket, her hand in mine. It didn't erase anything, but it softened something. Time passed. It always does, even when you feel stuck. Mina grew taller, her shoes got bigger, her questions changed. She started asking about when I'm older the way children do, with certainty. "When I'm older, I'll be a teacher," she said once. "Or a writer," she added another day. I never told her to be practical. I never told her to choose something that made money. I just listened, because dreaming was a kind of education too, and she deserved to have it. There were still hard days. Days when rain made the bins heavier and the streets smell like sour water. Days when my gloves tore. Days when I found nothing worth selling. Days when Mina came home with a new fee notice and my chest felt like it was filling with stones. But we kept going, not heroically, just steadily. Some nights I would sit by the window and watch the streetlights. Mina would sleep. I would think about her mother, not with anger, not with a story of blame, just with a quiet wondering. Did she ever think of Mina when she saw children in uniforms? Did she ever regret, or did she feel relief? I didn't know. I stopped trying to know. Some questions don't have answers that feed you. The city changed in small ways. New buildings went up, old shops closed, but the bins stayed. The waste kept coming. People kept throwing away their leftovers and their packaging and their half-used things. And I kept collecting, not because I wanted to, because school didn't wait for pride, because a child's future doesn't pause so a parent can feel dignified. One afternoon, Mina came home later than usual. She entered the room quietly. She sat down next to me and didn't speak. I felt my stomach tighten. "What happened?" I asked. She looked at her hands, her fingers twisted together. "A girl in my class," she said slowly. She said, "My shoes look old." I didn't speak. Mina's eyes were shiny, but she didn't cry. She was trying to be brave. "She laughed," Mina added, almost whispering. I felt something rise in me. Not rage, not a desire to hurt anyone, just a deep, tired pain, the kind that feels ancient. I leaned forward and held Mina's hands. "These shoes," I said quietly, "are shoes that walked you to school." Mina sniffed. "They're still shoes," she said, as if she was convincing herself. "Yes," I said, "and you're still you." She looked at me. "Do you ever feel embarrassed, Baba?" she asked. There it was, the thing she had been carrying. I breathed in slowly. I chose my words carefully. "I feel embarrassed sometimes," I admitted. "But embarrassment is just a feeling. It is not the truth about us." Mina stared at me. I could see her trying to understand. Then she said softly, "I don't want you to be sad." I shook my head. "I'm not sad because of the shoes," I said. "I'm only sad when I think you might believe you are less." Mina leaned against my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time. No speeches, no big lesson. Just my daughter's weight against me and the sound of the world outside, continuing as it always did. The next day, I collected a little extra, not for new shoes immediately. We still couldn't, but because I wanted to feel like I was doing something. Action is sometimes just a way of breathing. As Mina got older, she became more aware of things, not just her own life, other people's lives too. She would point out an older man sleeping near a shop and ask why. She would notice a woman counting coins at the bus stop and fall quiet. She was learning, not only from books, from watching, from living. One evening, she asked me again where I got the money. This time, her voice was older, not childlike, more careful. I hesitated. I had always tried to keep it vague, not because I was lying, because I wanted her to focus on school, not on the cost of it. But she deserved honesty, so I told her, not in dramatic confession, just plainly. "I collect recyclables," I said. "From bins and streets, I sell them." Mina stared at me. Her face didn't twist in disgust. It didn't fall into pity. It just held the information. Then she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "That was all. Okay." As if she understood that survival sometimes wears strange clothes. Later that night, I heard her moving quietly. I pretended to sleep. She sat at the small table we had and wrote something. The scratching of her pencil was steady. In the morning, she left a page near my cup. It was a short piece of writing, not polished, not for school. For me, it said, "My dad goes out early. He comes back tired. He smells like the city. He keeps going. He makes sure I have books. He is not small." I read it slowly, then I read it again. Something in my chest loosened, not completely, but enough to breathe. Life didn't become easier after that. Not suddenly. School still demanded fees. The room still had mold. The bills still came. But there was a shift inside me, a slight change in the way I held myself. Because Mina knew, and she didn't turn away. She didn't shrink from the truth of how we lived. She simply accepted it as part of the world. and in that acceptance there was dignity. Years later, I still collected. Not every day anymore. I found other small work too. Cleaning at night sometimes, helping an old man with deliveries. But the rubbish collection remained like a backbone to our survival. A quiet thing that saved us when other things failed. Mina kept going to school. She learned to write better. She learned to speak with calm confidence. She didn't become loud. She didn't become hard. She became steady. There was a day when she came home with a letter, a scholarship notice, not a miracle, not a golden ticket, just a small scholarship for students who performed well. It covered some fees. It helped. She handed it to me with trembling hands. I read it carefully, my eyes slow over the words. Then I sat down. My legs felt weak. Mina watched me. "Is it good?" she asked, uncertain. I looked up at her. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not because crying is wrong, because I was too full. "Yes," I said quietly, "it's good." Mina smiled, small and real. That night she studied at the table. I sat nearby, mending a sack that I might not need as often now. The room was the same. The mold was still there. The walls were still thin, but something had changed anyway. Not outside, inside, in the feeling of time. Because for years, time had felt like waiting in a line that never moved. Now it felt like the line had moved one step, just one. But real. Mina eventually reached an age where she didn't hold my hand on the street anymore. She walked beside me instead. That was normal. That was life. I watched her posture, how she carried her bag, how she looked people in the eye. She didn't walk like someone ashamed. She walked like someone who belonged. Sometimes when she was out, I would still go collecting. Old habits don't vanish quickly, and there were still expenses. Still days when money ran out faster than I expected. But I did it differently now, less secretively. Less like a man hiding, more like a man doing work, because work is work, even when it is quiet. One late afternoon, I walked home with a small sack of bottles. A little boy on the street looked at me. He was holding his mother's hand. He stared openly. Then he asked loudly, "Mom, why does that man take rubbish?" His mother hushed him. "Don't stare," she said, embarrassed. I kept walking, but the boy's question stayed in the air, like Mina's question years ago. Why does that man take rubbish? If Mina had been there, maybe she would have answered. She would have said, "So I could go to school." But she wasn't there. It was just me in the street and the weight of the sack. I reached our building. I climbed the stairs slowly. When I opened the door, Mina was at the table reading. She looked up and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one that said, "I'm here." I set the sack down. I washed my hands. I sat across from her. For a moment, there was no talking. Just the sound of paper turning, just the light shifting in the room. I watched my daughter read, watched her eyes move along the lines, watched her mouth form silent words. And I thought about all the mornings I had walked out into cold air, all the bins, all the careful searching, all the days I had swallowed pride like it was medicine. It wasn't a story with a clean ending. We didn't suddenly move into a bright home with fresh paint. We didn't become a family that forgot what hunger felt like. But we survived. Not loudly, not triumphantly, just steadily. And when I looked at Mina, sitting there with her book open, I felt something simple subtle in me. A quiet understanding that sometimes love looks like a sack over your shoulder. Sometimes it smells like the street. Sometimes it is unseen by everyone except the person it was meant for. And sometimes that is enough to keep going.